Hey guys, it's Cece and this is my December wrap-up. So I had an excellent reading month in December. I read 10 books, which is kind of insane. I kind of can't believe I read 10 books, but I'm actually going to be wrapping up 11 books because there was a book that I read in November that did not make it into my November wrap-up, so yeah, we're going to be talking about 11 books today, but 10 of them I read in December. So the first book that I want to talk about is the book that I read at the end of November, and it was a reread for me, and that is The Thief Lord by Cornelia Funke. So The Thief Lord was one of my favorite books as a kid. I just think it's so magical and wonderful, and it definitely stood up to an excellent reread. The Thief Lord follows two orphans, Prosper and Beau, when they run away from their aunt and uncle who are not being very good parents, and they run away to Venice because it is a place that their mother always told them about, and they fall in with a group of other orphan children and become part of a thieving gang. This is an excellent bit of fantasy. It is a middle grade book, though it is on the higher end of middle grade, but it is just so much fun and so descriptive and magical. This book completely captured my imagination when I was a kid and inspired me to go to Venice, and even though it took me about 10 years, I did manage to make it, and this book just captured me in so many ways. It is beautiful and descriptive and fantastic, and there's so many beautiful elements in it and the smallest hints of fantasy, and it's just fantastic, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. So starting in on December, for the first half of December, I only read ebooks because I was on vacation and didn't want to bother with physical books, and the first book that I read in December was Just One Day by Gayle Forman. So when I talked about this in my December TBR, I was a little off in what I thought this book was going to be. I did accurately describe what the back of the book says, but it was a very different experience than I thought that I was expecting going into the book. So this book starts the summer after our main character graduates high school, and she's going to go on a 3-week trip around Europe as like a school trip. And she's always had everything really planned out in life, and her mother has created a very specific set of rules. But at the end of this 3-week vacation, the main character happens to fall into the same man twice, and the second time he invites her to go with him and spend just one day in Paris before she goes home, and she agrees. And then things take a very different turn than I was expecting. This is not a gooey YA romance, though it sort of sets itself up to be. This is very much an exploration of the main character, and it's about trust, and it also starts with the lead character's whole first year in college, which was so exciting for me. I love reading YA set in college. It makes me very happy. But this book was just, it was a lot better than I was expecting it to be, and I thought it was very interesting, very different, and I loved all of the places that we got to see in the book, as well as the way time passed, because it kind of jumped from month to month with each chapter, which I thought was really interesting. And overall, I really enjoyed this book a lot more than I was expecting to, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read Bone Gap by Laura Ruby. I wanted to love this book so much. So I actually started it before I read Just One Day, and then I had to put it down because it just was not holding my interest at all, and I very nearly DNF'd this book, but I did come back to it and I did finish it. So this book is very much, it's got all these really interesting elements of magical realism. It is about a girl who is sort of new to this town called Bone Gap, and then she is kidnapped, but the only person who saw her kidnapped is a boy named Finn, and no one really believes him. This book has been really praised. It was nominated for a National Book Award, and it has been said that it's a very feminist read, which I did not see necessarily in the first half of the book, but I definitely saw those themes in the second half, and honestly the second half is what saved this book because I did not like the first half at all. It was really bothering me. I still don't really like Finn, the main character. I thought he was kind of I just didn't care about any of the characters, and the end did bring it around a lot more. I saw a lot of those feminist themes, and I did end up really enjoying the female characters a lot more than I was previously, but overall I gave this book a 2.75 out of 5 stars. Then I read Honey Girl by Lisa Freeman. This book was an adventure, and I feel like I can't accurately describe to you how surreal this book is to read. So this book takes place in Santa Monica in the 1970s, and the lead character, Nani, has just moved from Hawaii with her mother after her father has died. And it is about how she is trying to get in with the girls on the beach and all of the rules about trying to be part of the beach culture. And do you remember how I just said that Bone Gap was like really feminist? This book was not at all. But the thing is, I really enjoyed it. Like, at the very beginning, this book was supposed to be, one of the rules was girls don't surf ever. And so I naturally assumed that the book was going to be about, like, her taking that back and Nani learning to surf. But no, none of the sexist issues of this book were ever solved. You should know that going in. But I really liked it. It was just, it felt so, like, that part of it felt so much more realistic than to have a girl in the 70s just be like, and then I changed everything about beach culture right there. I liked that that's what it was, and that it was trying to represent the time. It felt very surreal to read this book. The girl culture of the beach was so interesting and different and weird. I felt like I could only give this book a 3.5 out of 5 because I feel like it didn't have, like, a lot of extraordinary literary merit, but I just enjoyed reading it so much that I did really like it. I don't know, this book was weird, and you should know all of those things going in. Next up, we've got the final book in a series, Dreams of Gods and Monsters by Laini Taylor. This is the final book in the Daughter of Spoken Bone trilogy, and it was a really solid finale. I really enjoyed all of the characters coming together, and I feel like I can't say that much because it is the finale of a series, but I did really enjoy it. My only issue was at the very end. I felt like it took on too many grand themes all of a sudden, and I felt very lost at the end, so I was tempted throughout the book to give it a higher rating than I gave the first two, but after the end not quite going where I was expecting it to, and me not quite getting into it, I wound up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars, just like the rest of the series. A solid series, not my favorite, but definitely an enjoyable one, and definitely excellently written. Next up, I've got Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit by Jeanette Winterson. This book is semi-autobiographical. It just takes inspiration from Jeanette Winterson's life, but it is not a nonfiction book, and it is about a girl who is adopted into a very religious family and is raised to be one of God's elect until she realizes she is a lesbian, and she really just can't stay part of this church culture. I was expecting to absolutely love this book, but this is not a lighthearted book. There are some joking elements, and there were some times I laughed, but this is not like a happy, fun read, which is not what I was expecting, but you should know that also going in. This book had so many beautiful quotes and so many moments that I was like, oh, that's so wonderful, that's such an interesting thing. My only problem was that this book was also, it had these moments where it would go into, like, talking about Arthurian legends, and it was, like, comparing Jeanette to some of the characters there, and I felt like I couldn't quite get it. I wasn't quite there with those elements, but overall I did really enjoy the language of this book. I enjoyed a lot of the quotes from it, and I wound up giving it a 3.75 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read I won't talk too terribly much about because I have expressed how I felt about it, and that is Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. This is the 4th book in the Throne of Glass series, and I didn't like it. I did a spoilery discussion / rant video about it if you want to go and watch that. But overall, I just didn't like the character development at all. I hated every single male character for the entire duration of this monster of a book. So despite the fact that I have loved the Throne of Glass series, this installment was not my favorite, and I definitely didn't really like it, and I gave it a 3.25 stars, which is the least number of stars I've ever given a Throne of Glass book, so unfortunately I just did not like this book very much. Now we are getting into the books that I read for the Holiday Booktubeathon. So the first book that I read was Princess Academy Book 3, The Forgotten Sisters by Shannon Hale. This is the third book in the Princess Academy trilogy, and it was so fantastic. I added this book to my favorites of the year list, so if you watch my favorite books of 2015, this is on there. It is just a fantastic continuation and finale, it seemed like, based on Shannon Hale's author note. This was a fantastic ending to the Princess Academy series, which has so many beautiful female characters and excellent moments for these female characters. It is a sweet, sweet fantasy middle grade / YA series, and I absolutely loved it. It definitely got a tab of every single color in here, and I just completely fell in love with this book. Definitely one of my favorites, and I gave it a 4.75 out of 5 stars. Next, for the Holiday Booktubeathon, I read The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. This is actually a collection of 3 short stories. It is a very quick book, and the short stories are The Yellow Wallpaper, The Rocking Chair, and Old Water. And I gave this whole book overall a 4 out of 5 stars. It was really enjoyable, very, very disturbing. This was so creepy. It was so creepy. Overall, I think my favorites go in order. My favorite was The Yellow Wallpaper, my second favorite was The Rocking Chair, and my least favorite was Old Water, but I thought they were all really strong and all really wonderful, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading this. I also read You're Never Weird on the Internet Almost by Felicia Day. This is Felicia Day's memoir. Felicia Day is so fantastic. I absolutely love her. I have been watching her in various shows for years of my life, and I have known how much I wanted to read this book since I first heard about it, and I definitely really enjoyed it. This book was just so interesting to read because Felicia Day and I had so many similarities in our childhoods. We were both homeschooled for most of our lives, which definitely affected her in the same way it did me as far as our relationships with other children our own age. I think it might be a homeschooled kids thing for the most part, that we're just socialized slightly differently, but beyond that, she also that's how she got introduced to being part of nerd culture, and that is definitely another similarity with me. And she also talked so frankly about her anxiety, which was such an interesting thing to read, and it was a lot of it talking about how extreme her anxiety is. Some of it was sometimes hard to read as a person who also has anxiety, but it was just so interesting and wonderful to read, and I just definitely fell even more in love with Felicia Day. I definitely loved hearing her talk about The Guild, which is a web series, which I've watched a bit of, but I haven't finished, although after finishing this book, I definitely want to watch the whole show. So I definitely really, really enjoyed this book, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. And the final book that I read in December, and the final book I read in 2015 was 2 AM at the Cat's Pajamas by Marie-Helene Bertino. I started this book a few days before Christmas, and then I wasn't getting into it, and I put it on hold, and then I read it the last 2 days before the year ended. This book is the story of 3 different people and how all of their storylines sort of converge at 2 AM on Christmas Eve at the Cat's Pajamas, which is a jazz club in Philadelphia, I think? I feel like this book took place in Philadelphia. But overall, I just couldn't get into this book at all. I felt like it didn't read very easily. I think Lindsay over at Lindsay Ray also complained about the same thing, that it just felt like you couldn't read it very quickly. The language didn't flow the way I wanted it to. I didn't really love any of the characters, and the end of this book was so weird, and it completely lost me, and I just could never. The only really redeeming factor of this book was I loved that moment when you finally hit 2 AM. It was worth the build-up. It was great. But then it dissipated again, and so unfortunately I gave this book a 2.5 out of 5 stars. So there you go, those are the books I read in December. I know you can really hear in my voice that my throat is not doing very well, so I really need to stop talking now. Let me know what some of your favorite books were that you read in December, and if you've read any of these books, what you thought of them as well in comments. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!